Hello again, I'm Maurice Barrett and I've got another food for thought for you this Friday morning. Trust you've had a good sleep, looking forward to the weekend. I've a new food for thought. I want to discuss hearing God's voice. And I want to say this, God looks at our hearts, not our prayer requests. Let me say that again. God looks at our hearts, not our prayer requests. That's why often God doesn't answer our prayers, because our heart's not right. I would think that 75% of all people's prayers are not answered, for healing, for provision, for whatever else. And yet they pray again, the same prayer, and don't get an answer. You know, unanswered prayer is the biggest hindrance to faith and positive praying. Unanswered prayer is the greatest incentive to faith and successful praying. So it's important that we get our prayers answered. But God looks at the heart. I'm a great admirer of the late Ian Bounds. I can recommend his books on prayer. He wrote many books, and he composed a poem. Let me read it to you. "'Tis not enough to bow the knee and words of prayer to say, unless the heart and mind agree, alas, we do not pray." You know, God looks at the heart. You worship me with your mouth, but your heart's far from me. So often God said that he couldn't accept the worship because the heart was far from him. The words worshipped him, but the heart was far away. I mean, that's common in these modern entertainment churches. Well, David said this in Psalm 66, verse 18. "If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me." People say, well, God hears every prayer. That's nonsense. That's not biblical. There's many reasons God doesn't answer our prayer, and there's one of them, if I bear iniquity in my heart. You know, there's a scary story in Numbers. It's more than a story, it's an incident about Balaam the prophet. He was told by God not to go and curse Israel, but he wanted to go and curse them, and he wanted to prophesy because he wanted the rewards of divination. He was covetous, we know that. It tells us in other parts of the Bible. So in his covetous heart, he thought of a scheme, and he said, let me go again and ask God. And God told him to go. That's amazing. God said, don't go. And then when he asked him a second time, God said, go. Had God changed his mind? Of course not. God didn't want him to go. But he looked at Balaam's heart and accepted his free will and told him accordingly. You know, that's scary. If our heart's not pure, we'll never find God's will. If we have our own agenda in the secret motives of our heart, then we'll never hear what we desire. If we have our own agenda in the secret motives of our heart, then we'll hear from God what we desire, and it may not be God's will. You know, God was angry with Balaam. He told him to go, but it wasn't his will, and he sent an angel to kill him. You can read the story as in Numbers, but his donkey saved him, but the angel was going to kill Balaam. God became a Satan, an adversary to Balaam. It's the same word, adversary, Satan. It's the same Hebrew word used. God stood against him because he asked according to his own will and not God's will, when God had already told him. You know, if God's told you to do something, don't go and ask God, did you really mean it? Because God may just answer according to what you want and not what he wants. Well, we need to examine our hearts before we pray. If we don't, I'm sure we won't get our prayers answered. And I'm sure if we do examine our hearts, we'll receive more answers to prayer. Maybe it'll be even change the way we pray, because we'll think instead of being on automatic pilot. I hear so many people and they talking so fast, and they've said it so many times, you could almost say verbatim the prayers on a Sunday morning in many churches, because they're not thinking, they're on automatic pilot and they're praying good prayers. But they don't get answered because the heart's far from it. Well, I'll leave you with one of my favourite verses from Proverbs. Proverbs 4:23. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. It may mean a difference to your answered prayers. Well, time's gone. Have a brilliant weekend. Don't forget, God listens to your heart, not your prayers. And keep thinking.